Hi, this is Gina Piscatelli again with a lecture for A&P2 at Madison Area Technical College. This is the second lecture of week 1, and in it we will look at the general structure and function of the circulatory system. We use the term circulatory system versus cardiovascular system because the word cardiovascular refers just to the heart and the blood vessels. It doesn't include blood, which is also a tissue in the circulatory system. So the components of the circulatory system include the heart, blood vessels, and blood. Blood is circulated by the pumping action of the heart. Blood leaves the heart through arteries, which branch repeatedly until they become tiny capillaries. So the definition of an artery is that it carries blood away from the heart. Then some of that blood that's moving away from the heart travels to tissues. We call that the systemic branch or the systemic circulation. So these tissues of the body will receive nutrients and oxygen from the blood as those diffuse out of the capillaries and into the interstitial space of the tissues. At the same time, the tissues produce wastes and carbon dioxide, and those materials will diffuse into the blood. Now, some of the blood that is carried away from the heart by arteries will instead go to the lungs. We call that the pulmonary circuit. And those arteries are carrying blood that needs to be oxygenated. So that blood will receive oxygen and expel or release carbon dioxide. Now, veins will eventually bring the blood back to the heart. That's the definition of a vein, any vessel that returns blood to the heart. And veins are formed as capillaries re-merge together. And so veins become bigger as they reach the heart. Now, this type of circulatory system that we see in humans is referred to as a closed system. And that's because blood always stays within blood vessels. Now, I know that there are materials that escape the blood, like fluid, electrolytes, nutrients, and gases. But in general, all the blood cells and the majority of the fluid stay inside blood vessels. Of course, some solutes, we will study the importance of how they get out and how they get back in and things like that. But in general, this is a closed circulatory system. No cells, blood cells like red blood cells, are going to leave a vessel unless there's damage, of course. To understand the significance of what a closed circulatory system is, let's compare that to what an open circulatory system is. Arthropods, things like insects, crustaceans, they have an open circulatory system. In this type of system, short blood vessels pump blood. So there's no heart per se. There's just enlarged regions of vessels that pump the blood to get it moving throughout the animal's body. And the blood leaves these short vessels, they're open-ended, and enters the main body cavity. So blood bathes anything, any organs or tissues that are in that body cavity. For the blood to get back into the vessel or vessels, it's usually a pretty simple system, not very intricate, diffusion has to occur. So the fluid by osmosis will go back in, and all the solutes by diffusion will go back in. And then it gets pumped right back out again. There are three main functions of our circulatory system. One is to transport material throughout the body. The second is to provide protection against disease, infection, and blood loss. And the third one deals with regulation of different things: body temperature, the volume of blood, the pH of the blood, as well as our other fluids in our body, and electrolyte and fluid balance. So let's look at the first general function in more detail, and that's transport. What is transported? Well, organic nutrients that our body has absorbed into the blood, like glucose, gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, hormones are released into the blood and travel throughout the body, waste products produced by our tissues, and body heat, because the blood comes from the core of our body, which is the warmest, from the heart, right? Arterial blood is very warm, and that distributes body heat. So transport's pretty straightforward, but how does the circulatory system provide any protection? Well, in blood, we have white blood cells, and these white blood cells help fight infection or invading organisms. And there are also some components of the plasma, complement and clotting factors and antibodies, that help either with the cessation of bleeding, like if there's damage to a blood vessel, the platelets and the clotting factors will help repair the damage as well as prevent blood from leaving through the damaged site. And they can also help with the repair process. Now, the last general category, regulation. The circulatory system is involved in maintaining its own blood volume. So that means that if, for example, there is damage to a blood vessel and blood loss does happen, the circulatory system can help either limit it through the clotting process, or also by increasing the concentration of blood and helping us keep the fluid in the blood so that not too much water escapes to the body tissues. Body temperature is also regulated with the circulatory system, and pH is regulated by the blood or circulatory system. Now, not all of our body fluids have exactly the same pH, but the blood pH is tightly regulated. The pH level of the blood needs to stay between 7.35 and 7.45. It can't change from there, otherwise problems occur. So if other body fluids produce too much acid or base, that eventually those find its way to the blood. The blood has a buffering system, buffers that resist these changes in pH. And of course, the plasma proteins that are present in blood, they do a little bit of buffering for pH. But as I mentioned previously, they help to maintain blood volume. So if you've heard of albumin, fibrinogen, any kind of plasma protein present in the bloodstream will help keep water in the blood as well. And so that maintains blood volume. The study of blood, which we're going to cover in the next lecture, is known as hematology. And this term hematology is not just an academic term. It also refers to studying a patient's blood, the content of a patient's blood. In general, the volume of blood found in healthy adults ranges from 4 to 6 liters. higher in males than females. Plasma makes up the largest proportion of that volume at 55%, and 45% of blood is due to cells, mainly erythrocytes, although there are other elements, we call them formed elements rather than cells, that are found in blood, and that would include leukocytes or white blood cells and thrombocytes, which are platelets. And as I mentioned previously, the pH needs to stay between 7.35 and 7.45. And due to the plasma proteins, blood is more viscous than water. It's actually 5 times more viscous. Oh, the proteins and the cells. So in the next lecture, we'll look in more detail at blood plasma. Thank you.